One for the Birds by Jackie DeVille. Sinking into his seat at the cafe, George Pellman looked around at his friend who was sinking his teeth into a blueberry muffin. I got coffee, but can't afford no food, George sighed sadly. The wisps of pastries added fire to the gurgling inside his stomach. Let me see. Harold thumbed through his wallet and grabbed a 20. Here, George, it's on me. He smiled to George, whose face bore a sadder look of gratitude and a wish to have more money. What's wrong? Harold had asked him. Oh, I just feel so lame taking money from you. The new job is going well, and the new apartment is as expensive as hell. Welcome to the club, friend. Harold laughed. I've been in this club before, but since recovering from homelessness, I have wished and wished to my soul I went to college when I was younger. Well, what would you want to study? Birds. George looked at the 20 that was still in his hands and added, I'll be right back. George stepped up to the counter where the magician barista with her potions and red hair smiled at him. 1 minute, hun, she said to him. She was cleaning out the latte pitchers and steaming some with milk, pouring a bit of lavender in one drink, a bit of vanilla in another. She twirled around to heat up a sandwich for a customer patiently waiting in the corner booth, reading a comic book. Okay, hon, what can I get you? The master of brews and stews and sandwiches you chew looked at him with sparkling green eyes that made George melt into himself. I'll do a London fog and a cup of your soup of the day, please. George took out the 20 that Harold so graciously gave him. She started steaming the milk while she steeped the Earl Grey tea. Reaching for a cup, she accidentally knocked over a couple of bowls to the floor. Oh, shit. The barista, who was perfect in George's eyes, looked up at him and apologized. No worries, I'm sitting by the counter facing the storefront window. Take as much time as you need. My name is George. You can call for me whenever it's done. I'm in no hurry. George smiled at her as she carefully stepped over the broken glass behind her counter. So birds, huh? Harold greeted his friends. George had been so enticed by the cafe wizardry and witchcraft that he had forgotten their conversation. He peered out the storefront's window to see a robin dancing with the fluttering grace from limb to limb of a blossoming dogwood tree. You said you wanted to study birds, Harold asked. Oh, yeah, it's a random passion of mine. I've always collected field guides and studied them since I was a child. Got some binoculars and such. Just an unrealistic dream. Harold was one to push subjects. Would you be a biologist, veterinarian, a writer, or photographer, perhaps? There's many careers that you could, but the thing is, I couldn't. George gave his friend a sad look, eye to eye, with a determined glance of surety. I never went to college, and I sure as hell can't afford it now. God, the prices they're asking for a simple associate degree is fucking... They have scholarships, George. Believe me, I've tried. And the two switched subjects after a few moments of silence between rounds of coffee and tea. The barista served a delicious beef stew with a London fog that woke George up a bit for his night shift. That was when the dismal call came. Ring-a-ling, ding-ding, ring-a-ling. His back pocket vibrated. Hello? Hey, George, the familiar voice said. Oh, hey, Janet. I was just about to head that way. Everything okay? Yep, we're all good. In fact, I wanted to tell you that we're overstaffed tonight, so you have the night off. I see. Charlie messed up again, didn't he? The voice on the other line laughed. Yep, Janet then sighed. No worries, boss. I gotta play catch up on laundry anyways. But hey, George joked at her. She wondered. Are we still good for the rest of the week? I really can't miss any more days. We are, but I'm going to have to cut you from the line and move you to the dish. I'm sorry, George. If it weren't up to Charlie, you know he's the GM. Janet sounded regretful. Well, I'll take whatever you have to offer. I can't really afford to complain any more than I can afford to lose hours, but one is inevitable and one is not. Thanks for being a team player, pal. The phone conversation quickly ended with a cheerful, see you tomorrow in dish. It was followed by a certainly good night, Janet. Click. George didn't even have a load of laundry to do. He stayed pretty caught up since getting his first place after 3 months of living on the streets and sleeping at various shelters. He couldn't stand, wouldn't allow any smelly clothes here, he had declared to himself. He wondered what to do for the next 12 hours from 3 p.m. to dawn. He still had $10 left from Harold. He could spend it, save it. He could make it into a tiny paper airplane in his tiny apartment with no television. He looked around the crossroads next to the cafe. The bus had come and gone 7 times during the phone call, so he could wait 40 minutes for the next one or meander around the district. He put one foot in front of the other. He found himself walking, strolling almost against his will. No, because of his will. He found himself almost effortlessly gliding towards the place where he loved the most. It would not be closed to the public until a minute after midnight, and it was free of charge. There he could sit and wander on a bench and toss crumbs of stale bread to the pigeons, glancing up every now and then at the crows who called from their lampposts. Mallards and geese with seamless effort would glide along the pond or waddle along the shore. Woodpeckers in the nearby forest would dance together, hopping from one side of the tree to the other. Songbirds of all styles and colors flew along the branches of all the pear trees, chirping and singing melodies that George alone could identify like faces in the family portrait of his heart. This was a good idea, he thought to himself. A rolling vendor came along the paved path with wares for sale. It rolled and rolled with music box charm, and the employee pushing the cart was not selling hot dogs. What is he selling? George wondered as this little cart lit up like an October moon. As it neared his bench, birds would part from the path, and this bothered him deeply. Why must he interrupt my symphony? Who is this intruder? George realized his mind was being silly. Hello, sir, the vendor shouted from 30 feet away, ever nearing closer and closer, with squeaking wheels that clunked in rhythm. George nodded as to not attract any more attention. He was here for his winged loves, his successful cacophony of feathered Icaruses. I'm going to make this brief, the vendor said to him. Oh gosh, this won't be brief at all, George assumed. I am selling dream candles. They're $2 each, and they come with a nice candle holder. The vendor had a stoic look. It was an expression that expected rejection, an expression George himself knew all too well. What's a dream candle? George asked. Oh, I'm so glad you asked. The vendor smiled. Damn it to hell. Oh, well, I'm sure this man means well. He could tell the man was of Southeast Asian heritage by the dress and face. His accent, however, sounded as southern as anyone else in Tennessee. We all wish for something, you see. We have ambitions, hopes, wishes, and dreams. Keep this candle lit, and you will achieve your heart's strongest and most desirable goals. George thought it was cute. However, what could $2 on the nice candle hurt? He pulled out his tin. The elderly man noticed the holes in George's clothes, the torn cloth at the hem of his pants. Oh, unfortunately, I cannot break a tin, but for your kindness, you've shown me this one's on the house. And the old man tapped the side of his rolling cart. George picked a dark green candle, and the man smiled and fastened it to a holder, and carefully placed the two items in a paper bag. So what are you doing out here alone? No, don't answer. You're feeding the birds. You take great pleasure in solitude. And you love the birds, don't you? Actually, George Pellman was astounded by the man's intuition when he got interrupted again by him. No need. Carry on. I must go home. I've done 3 rounds in 5 hours in this large old park, and ain't nobody bought nothing. Well, I was gonna, George began to say. Never you mind, son. My work here is done. The hillbilly vendor with his high cheekbones and sunbrimmer's hat carried on with his golden robe blowing in the wind. What a fun guy, George thought. Strange, sure, but fun. George put the paper bag in his backpack and was content feeding the birds until the glow of the moon shining reflected off the water. He kept a mind empty of thinking, but full of images he held dear. He brooded as these images passed through his mind like a slide projector. The barista with the enchanting eyes. Slide. The moss that grew on the stones in his childhood forest. Slide. The moon glimmering off the surface of the pond. Slide. The cobblestone that led out of the park reflected some of the pieces of his heart. The pieces he imagined his heart to be in. They all contained an ambition, a want. George chose to instead count his blessings. When he did this, a casual smile found him. He made his way to the bus stop and read his book on the hour journey home. When he reached his 200-square-foot apartment, he placed his backpack on his bed. He unzipped the zipper to get his book out because he was so close to being done. The view from his window showed the moon glowing like honey-colored fire, and his fingers felt inside the pack and found the almost finished novel. They also brushed against a certain paper bag. George lit the dream candle with a match and turned off the lights. He read the final chapter of the book by the dancing flame which warmed his soul. And as the book was finished, he looked over at the candle, then out the window to the almost full waxing moon, then back at the candle. He saw the shadows of the room dancing by flame, whitened by the lunar glow. Far off in the distance, from his fifth-floor windowsill, he saw 3 blackbirds winging together, land on a wire below. He blew out the candle after drinking some water. George Pellman was bullied in high school for being awkward, for being fat, for being covered in horrendous bumps from head to toe. He would normally have these nightmares, reliving these experiences. The other teenage boys would sneer and poke fun, while whole gymnasium rows of popular girls and boys laughed. Even the teachers would join in by disciplining him for daring to get defensive. These dreams exaggerated all the worst fears that Mr. Pellman had as a mere child. When it was time for recess, while the other kids played dodgeball or baseball or whatever sportsy thing they decided to do, George, who either got picked last or not at all, would be stuck in the dugout or wandering around a grassy field with all the other loser kids. Sometimes he'd pick flowers or watch birds. In this particular dream, he found himself in gym class, running track outside as they did at times when the weather permitted it. Tonight in his dreams, George ran and ran, determined to keep up with his malicious peers who would push him, smack his acne-ridden back, or try to trip him. He ran as fast as he could, finding himself sprinting quicker than any runner seen in the Olympics. Pretty soon, though, what was going to be a nightmare turned into one of his best dreams. While running laps around the field quicker than the other kids who failed to get him, he spread his arms wide. He felt free for once in his imagined childhood life. Just then, as this freedom rushed through little Georgie's veins along with the runner's endorphins, he began to feel less weight on his feet. The grass below began to drift further and further away. He moved his arms a bit and lifted high up to the late summer sky, and soon he was in the midst of cumulus clouds. The children below gasped in wonder and began to cheer. George stopped moving, and as he landed on the grass, there was nobody around. Just a stack of field guides to North American, South American, European, and Asian birds. He looked at the books in the empty field, and he saw an apricot tree. There on a low limb of the tree was an African gray parrot, who opened her beak and began to speak. It sounded digital, for it was his cell phone's alarm clock waking him up in time to make brunch. Wow, what a dream! George felt like $1 million. He perused his streaming app for a new podcast on ornithology and bird keeping. Today in Dish, he was to begin his own education from a set of Bluetooth earbuds. He looked over at the dream candle of forest green. It had burnt down to the wick, unnaturally quick.